This link, questions concerning the core values, is going to be one of the most important ones for helping you to be successful in Portfolio Seminar. So let's visit it. You may have actually seen this when you had me for intro, where you of course were introduced to all these core values, and in my module you actually had to write about them, and I had a link to this in my requirements for discussing the core values, but you should probably go back to this. I have created this using a color coding system. Blue is actually the core values. Green are the student outcomes. For those of you in education, you know all about student outcomes, learning objectives, right? And then the questions that help to elaborate on the core values are probably the most important. We realize these core values are only, in all cases, a sentence long, and we know what they mean, but you may not. So let's walk through some of these. It'll take a bit of time, but I think it's well worth it. Depending on when you took intro, the wording here may have changed slightly. What we ask, though, is that you demonstrate understanding of a variety of genre conventions and exhibit rhetorical adaptability in applying those conventions. And that rhetorical adaptability is the wording change. What we're really looking for here is that you are capable of writing in different ways when faced with different situations. And that's really, as it says below here, the rhetorical situation has to do with audience, purpose, context, and writer, right? I don't think anyone should struggle with this value. You cannot get through our program without being exposed to multiple genres. So this one seems to me like it should be pretty easy. Notice the questions, though. They ask you not to simply list, and that's where I see people getting into trouble. They'll say, oh yeah, so I wrote this kind of paper and that kind of paper and this kind of creative writing piece and that kind of technical writing piece and that kind of this, that kind of that, but they never talk about it in terms of how it influences the writing. So look at the first bullet. As it says, how does the work within your portfolio reflect your knowledge of and experience with genres and rhetorical concepts embedded in them? Notice, how does the work within your portfolio reflect that? Not, did you just simply do it, right? The next one has to do with how do your portfolio selections demonstrate your expertise in various genres that you reproduce or that you produced within the programs, right? What relationship do you see between genre and other elements of the rhetorical situation? And how has that awareness of that relationship impacted the choices you make in your portfolio? And then all these subgenres that are listed here. How have you developed your understanding of those, right? So there's a lot of questions here. There's 4 bullet points. You are not expected to answer all of them. You're definitely not expected to answer them in this order. When I created this, I did not give any order to any of this. As a matter of fact, I probably purposely avoided any order so that you cannot simply answer these. I am seeing at least one analysis statement that did try to go through and answer each one of these in order. It did not hold together well. This core value felt like 4 different essays, 4 different paragraphs, each dealing with a different thing. What it really should do is it should hold together as sort of a mini essay, as each one of these should. Okay, let's move on to value 2. Another one that I think is pretty easy, but I'm not writing these, right? I'm looking at it from a different perspective. Value 2 is it says that you will understand theories of writing and reading and be able to apply them in your own writing. If you think about theories of writing and reading, what we're really talking about is ideas, concepts, anything that somebody has written that tries to get you to understand something in a larger context, right? And then you're supposed to be able to apply them to your own writing. Okay, this is really what we do in academia all the time. Here, read this, understand it, and then apply it. Okay, here's a biological concept. All right, learn about how the cell divides, and then let's go do a lab, and you find out and apply your knowledge of how a cell divides in this lab, right? And then writing your lab report. Things like that, right? Evaluating writing, everyone who teaches evaluating writing has this at the basis of the course. You read something and then you apply it. Courtney's module, you read about advertising, you have some concepts, and then you did a analysis of a particular magazine or website, right? So you've done this all along. You're doing this in all your classes. And if you have any question about whether you were doing this in a class, feel free to ask your advisor if the paper shows that. But I am quite certain that you are doing this throughout your career, not only in rhetoric and comp type courses where you were introduced to terms like intertextuality and possibly remediation, things like that, voice even. But then in creative writing courses, voice, character, story, plot, image, right? You read something about dialogue, for instance, and then you try to apply it in a story. This goes on all the time, like I said, right? Even writers, you read people and then you're influenced by what they have to say, and so you're really treating that as a theory of writing, and then you're applying it to your own writing. Okay. Okay. Value 3. Well, let me read the value first. You are going to demonstrate your ability to critically read complex and sophisticated texts in a variety of subjects. So whatever you've been doing outside our 34 credit major or even 22 credit minor or 22 credit liberal studies, you've been doing lots of other reading, and hopefully this is exposing you to different ways of thinking and different ways of understanding and different perspectives. So we realize here, as it says, while I would like this response to be specific and reference key works, including those both within and outside your writing arts major, you don't have to draw from your portfolio pieces to discuss this. They may not fit this, and we don't want you to have to try to jam something in. So feel free to draw from anywhere. What kinds of different strategies you use for reading different kinds of text is the first bullet. I know Wolf in his module, or even now in the opening week of Intro to Writing Arts, we give a work on annotation and then ask people to apply it to a specific text or article. And when we're having a discussion, we're hearing from people about how they are learning about different ways to annotate text and helping them to read differently. I mean, that's really what this is about. So you can talk about that. You can talk about other ways you've learned to read text critically. Here, this one, you can address this by talking about how reading other students' works has made you more critical. Reading other works of in the genre that you're trying to write. So this one is I think another one that you should have a lot of exposure to, and it may be a little bit difficult to address because there's such a vast possibility from which you can draw, but that it should be answerable. Okay. 4 is another one that we updated recently, changed the wording up slightly, and that is we added the word incorporate. Value 4 is really about research and how you do research and where you go to do your research and how you do research differently and how that affects the sorts of things you find out, investigate, and evaluate, but as well incorporate into your papers. People weren't talking much about how they actually incorporate the research, so we've added that into the core value. You can read through the bullets. I'm not going to read through all of those. But this one, like I said, is really the research portion and the research value. And you may see here, you may look at this and say, investigate, discover. What the heck's the difference? Really, there's the rhetoric and comp people sort of prefer the term investigate. The creative writing, those more in creative writing camp prefer the word discover. Really, they're very similar words, and maybe I should have a slash here instead of a comma to sort of show they're two sides of the same coin. But creative writers are always doing research, not just necessarily in the library. But elsewhere as well, if you read Stephen King's On Writing, in The Writer's Mind, he goes out and rides around with a cop, and because he wants to see what it's like to do that. Right? I was once writing a short story long before the internet, and I wanted to know the side effects of a drug that people could get, and so I simply called the pharmacist and chatted with her for a bit and said, you know what, here's what I'm doing, and what happens if, what are the potential side effects of this drug on people, and then said thank you very much and hung up and incorporated it into the story, right? Okay, core value 5 is that you will demonstrate self-critical awareness of your writing. Like core value 1, you cannot get through this program without having lots of exposure to this value. I know when people walk in, often they say, I'm never going to share my writing with anyone other than the instructor. But as you found out, that doesn't happen, right? So here we're asking you to really talk about how you've learned to be a more critically aware writer via the sorts of feedback you've got, as it shows here, the sorts of approaches you take to different tasks and situations, hearing from others and how you incorporate that into your writing. Right, reading the works of others, you can see there's some overlap in some of these values. This sounds a little like one of the previous discussions. And then, right, what have you learned about the quality, or how the quality of writing is determined? You know, that forever problematic question of what is good writing, right? But how do you, you've certainly learned ways to approach that, and so, all of these questions are critical to that sense of self-critical awareness, right? And as it says here, you really can have a 6th paper. Shh, don't tell anyone. But if you're allowed to use a rough or early version of one of the portfolio pieces, even with comments on there, as it says, so you can put that in the portfolio if you want to use that. Most often I see people taking a paragraph from an earlier draft and discussing it, and saying, well, here's what I was doing, and here was the feedback I got from the instructor, the students, or whatever, and so I revised it in this way, and here's why it's more successful. So maybe they don't necessarily need the whole portfolio piece, but you can include it if you want. Okay, I know this can be a little slow, but I really want to walk through all of these so you have an understanding of them. So bear with me.